This is the only NFL show that you're going to see where it will be openly admitted that we just wing it. And that is what our process is, where you have just concluded week 2 of NFL. And I'm going to let Ron lead the way from here. What's on your mind after week 2, Ron?
Well, so here we go, Chris. And I know I just sent you some stuff a few minutes ago. So no rehearsal. Chris just got this. Today's format is basically a lot of stuff happened last week. We all know that. We all saw that. We'll incorporate that. But this show is all about moving forward. Today, we're just going to talk about team by team. We've got season win totals, adjusted season win totals for all 32 teams in the NFL. And after that, we're going to discuss divisional totals right now, where they stand right now. And so Chris and I are just going to go team by team, give our thoughts as to, do we think the number's been adjusted too high, too low, just right? What are our impressions? We don't care about what happened last week. We're talking about what we think is going to happen from here on in. Preseason doesn't matter anymore. Everybody's caught up with conditioning. So Chris, we've got Arizona alphabetically first, and they got a very lucky win last week. And you've got the total up there at 7.5, I believe. We know it opened 9 and 8.5 before the season. What are your thoughts on where the total lies right now? 7.5 wins.
Being surprised with this and not having their remaining schedule, not entirely sure, but weren't they supposed to be about 1-1 anyway at this point? So there's really no surprise, and the total's down quite a bit. Is that your angle here?
Yeah, my angle is always going to be, where did I expect them to be after 2 games? And I don't give, most people who do this, they don't give a full game for everything. It's not whether you cut and dry 1 win or 1 loss. It might be 0.75 chance of win for 1 week and 0.3 for 1 week. And basically Arizona right now, 1-1 would have been their ceiling. So I thought the 7.5 is a little low, but personally, I'm not biting on it because it's kind of a situation where I don't trust their coaching, and really they should have lost that game last week anyway.
Yeah, I had a lot of exchanges with people in the first half, and we were discussing how embarrassing their performance was looking at that time. So I get a passing grade on your first quiz. Where do you want me to go next?
Well, let's keep the alphabetical going. The next one would be Atlanta, whose season win total had been adjusted all the way down from 6 to 4.5 before the season started. And even though they're 0-2, and in excruciating fashion the first week, their number has remained 4.5. So we've seen no changes moving forward. If you want to bet over, if you want to bet under, it's 4.5 that you have to get to. Any thoughts?
I like my under 5 still. They're showing the spunk that I expected them to show early in the season before they get bit with the injury bug. I know that the fans of the team are frustrated that Pitt is not more involved. But no major surprises here. What's your angle?
Well, my thinking with this team is they got a head start on the rest of the league in a way because Mariota is a good fit. But that fit, again, like I said, the first 2 weeks are done. Everybody's going to catch up. And Atlanta still finds ways to lose games. So those who have sat on 5 and 5.5 season win totals should be feeling pretty decent right now because Atlanta will be competitive. But getting over the hump and getting 5 wins, I still think is a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I agree. It's a nice little start for the majority of people that have this under. No surprises, and they could have surprised, as you mentioned. Baltimore 10.5 with their injury situation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so 10.5. Obviously, all they have to do is go out of bounds, and they're 2-0. But instead of score the touchdown, and Chubb knows it now, but he should, or not Chubb, but Oh, got the wrong game there, so scratch that.
But, you had me wondering there.
I got the wrong game, but in terms of Baltimore, they blew a 21-point lead, so that's their other story. But luckily, the rest of the division didn't do well. We have divisional futures, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. Their total is bumped up, though. If you look at 10.5, they're 1-1, but their total bumped up. I'm not 100% sure it's warranted. And they do have injuries, like you said, Chris, but I think we just have to pencil them in with injuries all the time because that's what this organization seems to have. Ronnie Stanley, not completely healthy. They haven't had their starting running back now for all of 21 and 22, Dobbins. And they don't run the ball as well without him. They need Lamar Jackson to run. So I'm a little surprised the total bumped up, but I still think they're the team to beat in the division.
You know, they have these serious secondary problems all of a sudden over the last two games. They're giving up a lot in the air in the secondary. What are your thoughts there?
I thought they blitzed too much. I thought that problem was going to be solved when they dumped their Wink Martindale, their coordinator. Apparently, they still feel compelled to give Tua one-on-one targets. And when guys like Hill and Waddle catch the ball in stride, it's a problem. I think you're playing, when you're up 21 points, you're playing clock as much as you're playing the other team. And I think Baltimore didn't do that.
Yeah, you know, the coaching decisions with time management this past week were absolutely noteworthy. I tweeted yesterday, one of my predictions was that the Bills would, you know, meet some sort of obstacles during the season. It's only been 2 games, but they're looking like they're firing on all cylinders. And as you tweeted out, you don't step in front of a moving bus. Yeah. I still don't want any part of this over 12.5. Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, there's no dispute they're the best team in football right now. And I think only injuries would derail them. They're well coached. They're not making the same stupid decisions as other teams are making. They're only going to get better in the secondary when they get healthier. If that's their weak link, they're disguising it very well with their pass rush. I mean, you can't go over 12.5, but I don't see how you want to step in their way right now. And a great game coming up, Buffalo at Miami. But remember, it's at Miami. Even if they lose, they're going to get them at home later. So Buffalo's looking pretty good to me.
You know, you get these little glamour streaks occasionally, but I think this one actually is legitimate with Buffalo. They have not lost a punt. Like they have not had to turn the ball over on a punt. They did punt last night, but they got the ball back. So they had, is it 3 or 4 games in a row so far, dating back to last season, that they have not had to punt and give the ball over?
4 out of 6 is the answer, counting the playoffs. But let's switch gears and go to a team that's not at the top of the food chain. Let's talk about Carolina, a team that probably, with a roll of the dice, a flip of the coin, would be 2-0. But their mindset right now is 0-2. I think Matt Rule is 1 or 2 more losses away from being the first coach gone. And that's a problem because the Giant game was a wasted opportunity for them. And the game before that, on the long field goal, was a wasted opportunity against them against Cleveland. And you're seeing 5.5 on screen, but I want to point out, and I will point this out to you, Chris, and to everybody watching, that you can find 6.5 out there right now, which is something I did that this morning, went under 6.5, because basically that's the same number as it was before the season. And now they're 0-2 in a pair of toss-up games. By all rights, this should be 5.5. And when you get 6.5, it's just too good to pass up.
Yeah, you got me on this Carolina bandwagon. And, you know, I had a lot of my eggs in one basket this past weekend with Carolina in contests, and I bet them. And, you know, I'm just going to have to beat you pretty significantly the next time I see you when you visit in October for this.
Okay, well, wait on that, because I had the Giants straight up last week when they became a dog. So they became a power rating play. The line was completely out. And I did write this in my overreaction article. The mindset of Carolina versus the New York Giants, completely different going into the game. Very disrespected to make the Giants the underdog in that game.
This past week?
Yeah.
The Giants were favored.
I'm sorry, not at game time. Carolina was 1.5 at kickoff.
Really?
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah. Boy, that just was very disrespectful, I thought, and very out of line.
Are we touching on the Bears?
Let's touch on the Bears a little bit. I'm a little surprised that it's 6.5. If you see the
screen, are you kidding me?
They got a win week 1. Don't want to rehash it too much, but the reason they won that game is because it was Trey Lance week 1. It wasn't because the Bears outplayed San Francisco. It's just that San Francisco wasn't ready. I think the Bears. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think the Bears are one of those teams that they got a lucky win week 1, and it's going to be one of those teams that you don't see them in the win column all that much. They're not trusting their quarterback. What did they have? 7 passes through 2.5 quarters against Green Bay?
Yeah, I think 15 passes total in the 2 games, right?
Yeah. So how are you going to try to win that game offensively if that's what you're going to do in today's NFL?
Well, that game would have been a lot different. I did not see the play, but apparently a lot of people felt that Chicago did score that touchdown that would have made that game a little bit different. Did you see that play?
I did not. I was gone on Sunday night. We took the night off from watching that and didn't even check the score until the 4th quarter. So
you're a part-timer.
Yeah. Hey, I get one game off.
Now, the Bengals are very interesting. I believe that only one of their 5 projected starting offensive linemen have played any snaps at this point. So that's one thing working against them. Burrow did not have any preseason. That's another thing that's working against them. They're facing a tougher schedule, a little higher expectations. I'm not writing this team off at all, and I'm sure you're not either.
Yeah, well, you know how I felt about Cincinnati going in. So the unders were fully in play there. And they haven't got to the meat of their schedule where they're going to have short weeks and all this other stuff too. So they're going to face that. I think they're going to right the ship as far as the team goes. But I'm going to say it again. The offensive line needs at least 8 games to gel. When you replace 3 or more starters on an NFL team offensive line, they're not going to have the chemistry. They're not going to block the same way. They're not going to be in alignment. Now, I will say this. What's their number? 9.5 is what's showing for Cincinnati.
8.5.
8.5. Okay. 9.5 at another offshore establishment. And I took another under at 9.5. Did that this morning as well, because that's not the correct devaluation for them. The correct number is 8.5. So if you shop around and you see a 9.5, I think you get value on Cincinnati in this case, going under.
The Browns. Oh my gosh. I tweeted out that they've replaced the Lions for brutal losses. Lions fans were shocked because we saw Washington ready to come back. We expected the Lions to choke the second half, and instead of the Lions choking, they held on, and the Cleveland Browns had a classic Detroit Lions-like meltdown.
Yeah, see, this is the one that I hinted at earlier when Chubb could have just gone out of bounds instead of into the end zone, and then the clock runs out, and then the game's over. Instead, he scores. They miss the extra point. They're up 13. And then you know what happened after that. Broken play, 64-yard touchdown, which should never happen. Onside kick. They score. They make the extra point. Cleveland, it's good for our Baltimore futures, but that was a missed opportunity for Cleveland. Yet they're not devalued that much. we see 8.5. They're 1-1. You know, a lot of their totals. Now there were sketchy totals before the season because of the Watson factor. So we saw some 8s, some 8.5s. So I'm wondering, because Jacoby Brissett has not looked good. I think you'd agree with that. He just hasn't.
No, I thought he's regarded as having a decent game last game.
I'm going to look up his percentage, his pass percentage, and I'm going to guess that it's low as we're speaking here. Where might I find that? But I think 8.5 is a stretch for them right now. And I know they're going to get Watson back, but does that mean he's going to be ready to go? No, Brissett's, I take it back. Brissett's 40 out of 61. So that's an excellent percentage, but yardage is terrible. 376 on 40 completions. You need to be 11 point something, and he's 9.2 or something on completion. So they're not letting him airmail it down the field.
Well, I'm not giving up on these Browns yet. I think that can be a stepping stone type of loss for a team of their talent. I'm not going to endorse them or poo-poo them at this point.
Now, strategy-wise, I will say this: if you're one of the people who believes that Cleveland will beat Pittsburgh on Thursday night, which I think they have a good chance of doing that, and they go to 2-1. That's when you could the whole buy low, sell high. I would sell high on Cleveland at 2-1. If you want to fade Cleveland, I would wait till after Thursday. That would be my personal recommendation. And if Cleveland loses, you lose your opportunity. But if Cleveland wins, that number might even spike up to 9.
Now, I actually do have a strong opinion here. Dallas showed up, and they showed up well. I mean, I don't think it was like a one-game bump of, we're getting dissed and we're going to show up this game. I think that they showed that they may actually have some substance to their team that a lot of people thought was gone, so to speak. So I think these people that are laying minus 200 on the Eagles still in the division, good luck with that. I don't see any value in that wager. I think Dallas is still a force to be reckoned with, and you've got the Giants that are 2-0 also. I think this division is still very much up for grabs.
Yeah, I agree. I think all 4 are up for grabs. We didn't talk about this, and I didn't bet Dallas, but I reevaluated Cooper Rush because I was looking at player props before the Dallas game. And when I reevaluated him on everything he had done in his career, I noticed 2 things. One was he didn't take sacks, which surprised me. I thought that was going to be a problem. And then it turns out that in his career, he wasn't sack prone. And number 2, his pass percentage was decent, actually more than decent. So I think we talked last week, and I talked about a 7-point devaluation between Dak and Cooper Rush. I ended up making it 5 before the game, but I still wanted to see his performance. So even though the number was still high enough that I probably could have taken Dallas, I didn't like Dallas's team mindset. It wasn't, I had adjusted Cooper Rush and was okay with him, but I wasn't okay with McCarthy and the team. But they came out and won just like the way you said. So I'm going to play the wait and see game here. I don't think Cooper Rush adds negative or positive value. I just think it was interesting that Dallas's defense held Cincinnati to so few points.
Well, yeah, and we don't really know for sure at this point. This is another situation where we're through week 2, and that Cincinnati-Dallas game didn't really tell us as much as we would have liked. It still leaves questions with both teams.
Yeah.
Would you not agree there?
Yeah, I would agree there.
Yeah. The Broncos are obviously a huge disappointment. The head coach, obviously openly ridiculed, seems in over his head, should be coordinator. Everybody expected Denver to get off to a better start than they've had so far, but it's certainly understandable with a new quarterback and a new coaching staff that they kind of sputter out of the gate. What are your thoughts?
Okay, I'm going to give you a quiz, Chris. If I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What comes to mind?
I
better answer it for you. It's the Denver crowd in unison counting
that's
down
right.
the time clock.
Yeah.
I thought it was so fascinating and wonderful. I thought that crowd was amazing, but the Denver coaches need some lessons, that's for sure. And so we're looking at a 9.5, and I thought the number should really be 9. Personally, I haven't done it. I'm taking a hard look at the under. I'm going to look at the schedule a little bit more. They beat Houston in the ugliest fashion. It's just Lovie Smith at Houston, and that's the only reason why they won that game. And then the first game, we know they didn't play well. I mean, what's to like about Denver that they should only be devalued from 10 to 9.5 at this point?
I'm not seeing. Oh, here's Denver. Okay, let's see. Public service notice. If you get into the FanDuel site, they actually put some of the overs on the bottom and some of the unders on the top. So be very careful there.
Thanks for mentioning that. And I have purposely not put in an account with books that do that because it makes me think that I'm going to make a mistake.
Well, yeah, you got to pay careful attention. Now, we get to the Detroit Lions, my team, and it's just absolutely fascinating how I did not expect them to be able to get separation from Washington. I think that last game says more about Washington than it does Detroit, potentially. And the metrics on Detroit are just completely out of whack at this point. And that's something that's going to worry me when I do fully integrate my spreadsheets week 4. Because right now, Detroit's the number 3 team offensively in my rankings. And I've seen other people rating them as a team in the top 15. So a lot of goofy things going on. And the comedy with this situation is Jim Campbell openly admitted his scouting last night on Monday Night Football, getting too drunk, passing out, and waking up and not being able to read his notes before he passed out. So I'd love to hang out with him while he's scouting. I'm not so sure how that will help the Lions, though.
The ultimate players coach. I see the number 6.5. I believe the number was 6.5 preseason.
Yeah.
They're 1-1, about as expected. To me, nothing has changed with the Lions. And as long as running back Swift stays on the field, then they have a more diversified offense. The minute that he goes down, I would worry about the Lions.
Well, you had 2 of the top 5 offensive performers in the NFL last week come from the Lions last time I checked. I don't know whether they changed after the 2 Monday night games, but it might have. Brown has tied an NFL record for most number of games consecutively with 8 receptions.
Yeah.
And he's a favorite to kind of break that record this week against the Vikings. I think this is a really flat spot coming in this week for the Lions, coming off of a nice win that they needed, and the Vikings puking on national TV once again. What are your thoughts there?
Not a flat spot in a divisional game. Can't be this early to do that. They need to seize the moment. They're only 1-1. Isn't everybody 1-1 in the division, actually? So
yeah, but the Lions actually have the tiebreaker with the highest point differential, so they're leading the division. And only San Francisco really is in their way to get to the Super Bowl, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, now that we've got that out of the way, basically, I don't see a flat spot at all. Either they're good enough or not good enough, and certainly we can get to Minnesota later. But Minnesota's weakness is the secondary.
I don't think very many people are surprised that Green Bay came back week 2 with a very strong performance. And we're looking at a 10.5 here. It's a nothing burger for me at this point.
Let's move on. Yeah, let's move on from Green Bay. Nothing has changed. They're 1-1.
Yeah.
Okay, no big deal. Didn't we expect that?
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah. Houston, what do you got?
Well, they could have gotten one of these wins. I haven't given up on Houston. I've heard some people still putting them 32nd. They're not the 32nd team in this league, by the time this season ends, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, their total has stayed flat. Basically, I guess everybody knows my opinion of Lovie Smith, but he's cost them 2 wins already. He clearly cost them the Indy game when they were up 17. Do you know how many times he's punted in advantageous going for it situations in 2 games? 4 times already. Yeah, it's ridiculous. He is so behind the times. His team isn't bad. It's a veteran team. They've improved slightly, not that much, but slightly their running game. Davis Mills has looked like a veteran. He's cool, calm, and composed. And Lovie Smith is wasting a 2-0 start. I mean, 0-1-1, but a tie is a loss when you're talking about season wins. Mm-hmm. So technically, Chris, they are 0-2. Finding 5 wins on this team, and for those of us who have under 5, finding 6 wins on this team as long as Lovie Smith is a coach. If he does that, I'll write the check. But I don't, I'm okay. Houston is going to underperform analytically all season long.
Yeah, you kind of can correlate them with Dallas a little bit, although Dallas was very well coached for once last week.
Yeah.
Traditionally, it's pretty much recognized that Dallas does not have quality coaching. And that's the problem with Houston here, that they're going to have to win despite their coach. And we talked about that before the season, that we were skeptical on how well he was able to do. And speaking of skeptical, I'm kind of skeptical at the Colts' chances here to do very much this season. It's a disastrous start by any measure. Win total down to 7.5.
Matt Ryan's skill set seems to have been declining. He couldn't get him. I thought maybe going from Atlanta to Indianapolis would help his red zone performance, number 1. And number 2, the fact that I mentioned in Indianapolis has 7 receivers over 6'3", I thought would help their red zone performance. And instead, they were shut out. The number is 7.5. It actually came down 2 full games from 9.5 to 7.5. I think that's an overreaction move because they still have divisional games, but obviously they have to play better.
Yeah, but they were slated to go 2-0 here, and they're 0-2. So the 2-game chop off the season win total, as far as I'm concerned, makes sense.
Well, I would have given them a half a win for Jacksonville. They have a lot of trouble there, short line, Jacksonville. I would have done a half there. And their first game, who did they lose to the first game? Or they tied to Houston. Yeah, that should have been a win. So I would have knocked them 1.5 instead of 2. The division's still up for grabs because that's a horrible division. But they have to get Darius Leonard on the field.
Yeah, that's going to make a big difference. When you're not playing with Leonard and you're not playing with Pittman, that's going to cause them some issues. And we talked about this, that Tennessee was likely going to, quite possibly finish in 3rd place. Jacksonville looks in, not unreasonable situation to possibly win this division if the Colts keep going south here. Potentially, but I certainly think the Jaguars are a better team than Tennessee.
Well, Jacksonville's 1-1. They had that toss-up game where both teams weren't ready against Washington. Washington-Jacksonville was pretty much a toss-up game.
Yeah.
But the last game, obviously, they performed very well. They have a good front 4. They certainly have the other Josh Allen, the defensive end. Josh Allen is a star, kind of an unknown person, but he's a star. I think Jacksonville's on the right track. I think keeping it at 6.5 is tempting almost to bet the over if you believe that.
Yeah, let's bet that right now. Here, I got the app open.
If you've got
go over.
Yeah, if you've got regression with the other 3 teams in the division, there's a chance that Jacksonville outperforms at 6.5.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking in pretty good shape here. But that's a real shocker with their defensive performance shutting out the Colts. What do you make of that?
I think the Colts are in disarray right now, but I give credit to Jacksonville. I didn't see any of that happening with their secondary. Yeah, I think when they play tougher offensive teams, you're not going to see a repeat of that. Who do they got this week? They're at the Chargers, so that's going to be a much stiffer test depending on how Herbert's ribs are holding up in his cartridge.
I can't tell you how bad this app is. It's just torture. Kansas City, another team that I thought might have some obstacles this season. They're looking pretty darn good. They did not show up last week as the world beater out of the gate. So I kind of like them. I mean, they're showing all the signs that they're just they are the number one or number two team in the league at this point. And I didn't necessarily expect that. I mean, they were supposed to have mortgaged this season for future seasons, getting rid of Hill and getting all those draft picks. And geez, they may be a better team this year than they were last year.
I think their future is very bright. Their offensive line is unbelievably solidified now. 5 new guys, and they're all solidified from last year. Halfway through last year, we saw them gel, and they continued that. But I'm holding the brakes on endorsing them all the way through, because basically they were supposed to win against the Chargers, and a toss-up game. I would give them 1.5 wins. They're 2-0. They beat Arizona, a depleted Arizona. They beat the Chargers, but they beat the Chargers at home. So I'm not even ready to give them the division yet. But coaching again is going to not lose them games as compared to other teams. So I understand them being 11.5. I don't think that's too low, but I think they're still vulnerable. And Frank Clark. Is it Clark? One of their guys, maybe Gay. One of their front 4 defensive linemen has been suspended for 4 games. Something to look at.
Yeah, I didn't take note of that. You know what? I had this conversation with 2 other people this morning, and the Raiders are what I kind of thought they were going to be. I mean, they aren't a disaster by any means, but they could potentially be faring better than they have been. What are your thoughts on the Raiders so far?
Okay, so here you've got the screen up, and the Raiders are 7.5. They're 8 elsewhere, and I think 8 is more correct than 7.5. I think, well, obviously they should have won the Arizona game, but they let that get out of hand in the schoolyard plays at the end of the game. I thought specifically that the Raiders were in a bad situation week 1, so I don't discount them for losing that game. So I think they still are an 8-9 or 9-8 team when all is said and done. It's not an easy schedule, so we know that. And there are some flaws to the team. The offensive line is hardly perfect. But if I had to give some advice on this, I would look at that 7.5 and say, I think that's too low.
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I don't have any confidence that they're going to hit the 8 wins at this point. They were supposed to be 1-1 by now, and they've been downgraded a win. So,
okay,
I don't see. Go ahead.
That's fair, but that's all right with me too, because I'm definitely invested at under 9, for the season. So if they hit 8, great.
The Chargers seem a little out of step as far as my perception. It's not that they've done anything bad, but they're not sticking out as better than last year yet. What are your thoughts so far with the Chargers?
No opinion whatsoever, up or down from where they are. I thought they'd beat the Raiders. They did. I thought they could beat Kansas City. They didn't, but that was a toss-up game, and it was at their place. So I think the Chargers are still in line. I think the 10.5 is still in line. You worry about Herbert, make sure that he's healthy. That would be a big loss.
Yeah.
So I don't run to over windows when one injury can kill you. It's just that same thing I say year after year after year, bet more unders. But I like that. I still think there's value in the Chargers versus the division if they stay healthy.
The Rams have been a huge disappointment so far, but as you and I mentioned in earlier episodes, we didn't expect them to do all that much. And we basically had the opinion coming in that they were slightly above average at best. Certainly not going to be a juggernaut runaway divisional winner. And that's exactly what they're looking like at this point, where you see glimpses of talent, and then you see, what are your thoughts there?
Well, anybody who listened to us the last month or more knows that we have the Rams at 9-8, basically. Their number opened 11, which was very nice, and actually was 11 with some juice a lot of the time, and 10.5. And now they're still 10.5. They're 1-1. They beat Atlanta. They lost opening day to Buffalo. So there's no surprise there, because Buffalo was, I thought, was going to beat the Rams just like they did. But as the roster is constructed right now, they're a 9-8 team. The one variable is that the Rams aren't afraid to change their roster during the year. And I always have to be aware of that. I think right now there's still a little value on the under at 10.5.
I put some sandwich money on the under also. I agree with you. The Dolphins, I think that they're going to get some bandwagon members this week. And I'm not so sure that anybody should be riding this bandwagon, so to speak. If you're really looking underneath things, the Miami victory wasn't as good as people think it was, and that's both weeks. They like seem to have subtly done well, but if you really dig deep, there's some leaks in the in what the perception may be. What are your thoughts with Miami?
Well, I think in general, they're going to play a little bit worse defense than last year because the defensive coaching staff is gone. But every day I'm growing to like this coach more and more. I think he's what Staley of the Chargers, what some people expected him to be, is happening in Miami. I mean, this guy gets it. He understands a lot of things, and he does have an incomplete roster. That offensive line is not very good, and it's actually banged up, and it's not very good. But they've reassembled this team with a lot of speed. They've catered it to Tua's strengths. And, I mean, I think they're a force to be reckoned with, even if they have some personnel flaws.
Yeah, and we have to remember that Tua – I don't think he ever threw for 4 touchdowns in college, if I'm not mistaken. He may have hit 4, but, he picked up all these stats and, coming from behind, sort of like the Lions did all last season, where it's a lot easier to get the stats that he accumulated when they're in this type of situation in the fourth quarter. And obviously the defense just broke down at some point. But don't overreact to what Tua did last week is my point. Would you agree?
Well, I'm okay with what Tua did. I just think that you shouldn't overreact with overall that Miami, came from behind 21 points, because more times than not, they would have lost that game against Baltimore.
The Vikings 10.5 just sticks out as a little high at this point, but the under is -145.
Yeah, with Minnesota, I mentioned it last week. I think you were surprised. I don't know if we mentioned it on air or off air that I gave them 47 sacks for the season, defensive sacks. And they had 7. They have 7 through 2 games. So they're easily eclipsing that 47. That's right. Their strength. Their weakness is their secondary is not very good. And you saw Jalen Hurts carve it up time after time. So I think this 10.5 is an overreaction. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be competitive all year long. They ran into Philly on Monday Night Football. That was a toss-up game where maybe a little bit more lean to Philly for me. Didn't play the game. But I think that Minnesota will have some highs because I like the culture there. But anytime you have a bad secondary, it's cause for concern in the NFL.
And they changed their coverage from week 1 to week 2. And it was kind of odd that they stuck with it, even though it was failing. So a little bit of a coaching concern there that they were not able to make the adjustments at halftime when they were getting burnt with the different coverage that they were not using the week before that saw so much success against Green Bay. Did you have any information on that?
I think they got fooled by the game plan. I think they looked at Philly game plan second half of last year, the beginning of this year, and they said, we got to contain Hurts. We got to stop him from running. They're going to be run centric. And then Hurts has different weapons this year. He has Brown. He has the second year of Devontae Smith. It's a different team. So I think Minnesota's defensive game plan got exposed.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because they gave Hurts all the short yardage type situations, and Hurts just chewed them up and spit them out. And they're facing the Lions this coming week, and the Lions have the tools, to do the exact same thing as far as I'm concerned. So Minnesota's going to have to change it up coming into this Lion game. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it'll be a shootout this Sunday.
Could be. Patriots are a disappointment for me.
Open 8.5, stays at 8.5. They lost to Miami, not a surprise. They beat Pittsburgh, not a surprise. I have no opinion on this team. To me, they're the same as they started.
Yeah, after 2 games, we really don't know what they're about still. So I kind of agree with you there. I think the Saints are going to have a hard time meeting their expectations. I believe this total was 9.5. Now it's down to 8.5 because they lost a game that they could have won.
Yeah.
Winston's, he's got the fractured ribs, or no, he's got the back issue. And Kamara hasn't been playing. He could be back this week. That would help. The Lattimore, you know what? The Saints were poised okay this past Sunday, and I'm not one to gripe. But that pass interference or the unsportsmanlike conduct on Tampa Bay when the score was tied was just a backbreaker and changed the whole complexion of that game because I didn't consider that to be unsportsmanlike conduct. Did you see that play, Ron?
I saw the play, and you probably saw my tweet. As soon as Lattimore was kicked out of the game, that was it. That gave Tom Brady a green light. Yeah. Lattimore... Tom Brady just doesn't throw the ball effectively against New Orleans. But you take Lattimore out of the equation and look what happened. Completely changed the game. Now, I think Dennis Allen is not a good fit with Jameis Winston. And I think New Orleans left points on the table in the first half. And I blame that on the staff more than anything. I think they lost a win opportunity in that game that they're not going to get back. I think are they going to be conservative with Winston and then start winning games again 15-10 and stuff like that? Or we're going to see some unders with the Saints? I don't have an opinion on the win total at all. I think I'm like you. I'm just disappointed in what they produced.
This Saints Carolina game is an interesting matchup because both of these teams really need a win at this point. So that's a game that I'm going to be focusing on. I don't know which way, but both of these teams are going to be motivated severely. And, the Giants, one of 6 teams that are 2-0, I believe. I was very surprised that Carolina wasn't able to win that game. The Giants showed a bit of character because they had that big win week 1. They showed up defensively, and the defense won the game for them. Against a very hungry Carolina team that, underperformed, frankly. McCaffrey didn't look like his old self with his explosiveness, and the Giants held him in check.
Winning breeds confidence for new coaches, and for the Giants to start off 2-0 when they could have very easily been 0-2. Tennessee's fire drill cost them the win with their settling for a 47-yard kick that missed. And then you had really a toss-up game, as it turned out, between the Giants and Carolina. So the Giants have definitely stolen a win here. That's why you see the number go from 7 or 7.5 all the way up to 8.5. I'm not sure the 8.5 is warranted, but I do place a little bit of value on confidence with the team and the fact that they trust this coaching staff a lot more than they trusted the last coaching staff. And you can't argue that Barkley's a different player this year as compared to last year.
He looked really good. I didn't watch a lot of the game, but the little bits and pieces I saw, Barkley looked really good. He got extra yards that somebody else would not have gotten from what I saw. And the Jets, boy, they showed up. And now their team total's 5.5. Oh, no, it was 5.5 before. Why is it not higher?
It was 6 most of the time. And then when Zach Wilson went out, it went to 5.5. I mean, I have a team. I have the season win total 6. Under was plus 115. That was widely available. But then they had those injuries. In fact, it was almost going to go to 6.5. I waited as long as I could to see if I could get 6.5. And in the end, when Becton started to get x-rays, I said, I better just pull the trigger at 6. Obviously, they stole a win against Cleveland. I mean, they should be 0-2 on their way to 2-8 at best. This is still a flawed team. Obviously, I wish that they were 0-2 instead of 1-1. I think the 5.5 is dangling there and is the absolute correct line right now.
Yeah, a little surprising. I didn't know what the line was coming into the last game. The Eagles are attracting everybody's attention at this point. I think they're up from, were they 9.5? Are they up?
They were 9.5 with a little juice to the over, and now you're seeing 11.5. So, I mean, they look really good, but this has to be an overreaction. I'm going to look at this very carefully. I'm going to look at the schedule very carefully. This coming week, who do we got on them for this week? They play at Washington. They played very well at Washington. Even that line looks a little inflated according to my power ratings, though. So are we all of a sudden anointing Philadelphia as the second or third best team?
How is that line 7?
Yeah, so it doesn't. My power ratings won't support 7. It supports 4.
Oh my gosh! I'm just falling asleep at the wheel here.
Yeah, you got to get busy, boy.
Jesus. Well, I started the NCAA, and this is Looney Tunes.
See, well, Chris, this is an example of why we talk. We're kind of brainstorming as we speak in front of a national audience of whatever number of people are going to watch this. But basically, Philly is a very good team. But do you really think they should be 11.5?
No. But they've got a very easy schedule. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, they play a lot of these divisional games, and I expect them to go about 4-2 in the division. 3-3 would be disappointing for them.
Do you? Did the Minnesota screw up their coverage, or
Minnesota
is Philadelphia that good?
I think Philly has shown the ability to create offensive schemes that I wasn't sure they could. That was a good effort for them. But Minnesota, like I mentioned before, they don't have a good pass defense. It's one of the bottom 8 pass defenses, in my opinion, in terms of skill set. So let's not read too much into the fact that they got carved up by Philadelphia. It was a good game plan. I think Philadelphia is certainly capable of winning a division. Nothing wrong with that. But are they 12-5 capable? I really don't think right now. I'm going to take a hard look at this one. I don't think they're 12-5 capable right now.
We don't have their schedule posted. Who did they beat in week 1?
They beat Detroit. How could you forget?
Oh, Jesus. Well, I purge those type of memories.
Yeah. No, they don't have a tough schedule. They'll play Green Bay later in the year. New Orleans later in the year. They're at Arizona. They host Dallas. They host Pittsburgh. It's a schedule that could see them favored in 12 or 13 out of their 17 games, maybe even more. So it's a hard look for me. I don't see them as an elite team, but we as we're brainstorming, I know the schedule's not that difficult.
Yeah, that's the only issue. I think it'd be disingenuous to sit there and comment without it in front of us. Pittsburgh is clearly frustrating to me. I'm on record as saying that Trubisky would be fine, and he's a huge disappointment. They're obviously not going to go to him to Pickett on a short Thursday week. But with that 10-day rest, if Trubisky doesn't show up on Thursday, I believe that we might see a Kenny Pickett start week 4. What do you think?
First of all, let's not overreact to Trubisky. Although I'm not high on him, I wasn't low on him. This offensive line for Pittsburgh is still bottom tier. And so everybody blamed Big Ben, but the bottom line is nobody's had time to throw behind the Pittsburgh offensive line. The wide receivers could play a little better. Their run game hasn't got unleashed because they're not opening enough holes. I do like their tight end. Yeah, I like their spunk. I like how they come to play. But week 4, they host the Jets. So if they do lose to Cleveland, and I think fatigue is still a factor. They had an overtime game week 1. They had a tight game against New England week 2, and now they have a short week road game. If you give Pickett 10 days to face the Jets, that's not a bad opponent to try to get him going.
Yeah.
I expect Pittsburgh to be 1-2, but if anything, I would lean under to their win total, but I'm not pulling the trigger. I think their defense is good enough when healthy to put Pittsburgh in every single game this year.
Traditionally these Thursday games have been real duds.
Yeah.
But Cleveland really needs this game, and Pittsburgh really needs this game. And that seems like a lot of points. It just seems like a lot of points with a backup QB for Cleveland. I'm high on Cleveland. I think they're too easily dismissed. But Pittsburgh's got to get a win. And so I think this Thursday night game is very interesting.
The line is a little high according to my numbers, but in this particular case, I trust the line instead of my numbers because of the situation.
Yeah. It's a tough game. It really is.
It's a very tough game for Pittsburgh.
Wasn't San Francisco 10.5?
Yeah, they were 10.5 juice to the under, I think. And there is no learning curve anymore. You heard me mention this. We talked about this. The learning curve is over because Trey Lance is not on the field.
This seems short. It really does.
Well, I'll give you another look later in the show, but I think the reset is 9.5. I understand that. Here's the situation with San Francisco. They're 1-1. They lost the game to Chicago. That's why
they were supposed to get that Bears victory. So yeah.
Okay. But and of course they were going to get the Seattle victory with Seattle's Super Bowl being played the week before. But they did this without 3 guys. They don't have running back Mitchell. It makes a big difference. They don't have their best defensive back Ward. It makes a big difference. They don't have one of the 2 best tight ends in the game, Kittle. They're 1-1 without their 3 best players. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I'm expecting. Well, you know what? Lance is gone, but Lance needed Kittle in there. That was he needed that security blanket like Brady had with Gronk.
Absolutely.
But Garoppolo is going to be able to use him also, and this is certainly a sort of a blessing in disguise to position themselves better. I think they would have liked to have seen Lance get more action, but San Francisco is clearly going to be a better team with Garoppolo in the lineup. And moving on to Seattle, I think Seattle's more like they were in game 2 than game 1. I don't think you would disagree with me there, would you?
No. I mean, if Seattle wins 6 games this year, it's going to be an enormous decision for me. A very, 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 very good decision. I can only lose at 4 games or less. So when you see a 6.5 and there's less juice other places, I took a position under 6.5 earlier today, just to mitigate some of what I saw, because I agree. I like what I've seen from Geno Smith, but he has a low ceiling. Let's keep that in mind. I like what I see, but he has a low ceiling. We know Jamal Adams is gone from the secondary. This is a team that just doesn't have enough good players. That's my statement.
No, I agree. You had to kind of perk your ears up after game 1, but I think game 2 is more representative of what they are. Tampa Bay was another team I thought would hit some obstacles, and a little frustrated with how that game went against the Saints, because not only did that unsportsmanlike conduct occur, I saw the replay on the interception when the Saints got the ball back, and I didn't think that was an interception. I've never seen a play leave the evaluation on the monitor so fast. I mean, they say, "Oh yeah, it's an interception." I didn't see that, but I still am not a believer in Tampa Bay. I think that their defense is pretty solid, but that offense is sputtering.
They missed Gronkowski. We talked about that a lot. Who did they beat week 1? They beat Dallas week 1. Yeah. Which actually going in, that was my one loser that week. I thought Dallas had more than a 50-50 chance to win that game. So I think they've stolen a win, which hurts my seasonal win total of 11.5. We're still seeing 12.5 now. I mean, I would be tempted to go under, but I think the defense is playing better than I expected.
Yeah.
I thought they'd lose something without Ndamukong Suh, but they seem to still be okay. They're missing a ton of wide receivers and Gronkowski. So they're relying on Fournette and relying on the expertise of a 45-year-old quarterback, and it's working. I'm worried about Tampa because there's just not enough good competition in their division to keep them honest. I agree with you. I think they have flaws, but I don't know if they're going to be exposed.
Yeah, it's a tough situation to monitor. The Titans, I want to remind people, I never had them in my top 10 list on my metrics that have proven to be very successful over the previous 7 years. I didn't have the Chargers in the top 10 at any point either last season, and I still don't this year. And I do have my week 2 rankings, and boy, is Tennessee looking bottom 5 at this point. Never a believer in Tennessee. I think they exposed themselves last night for what they're going to be, and they're going to be lucky to get to 500. I think Jacksonville could finish second ahead of them if Jacksonville doesn't actually win the division.
No value here because they've been knocked 2 full games, and rightfully so. So there's no conversation on the win totals. But I'll just say again, I talked to 2 or 3 people who said you got to take Tennessee plus 10 against Buffalo, and I reminded them, don't get in front of that train. There's a big difference between Buffalo and Tennessee.
Yeah, I did a rare 3-team parlay instead of a 3-team teaser that closed on Buffalo, and I didn't consider hedging because either Buffalo loses by 1 possession or they blow out the other team. So what good were the points going to be? Was my thinking, and sure enough, that was the right read on that. Washington just did not show up against Detroit, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think Detroit, even as a fan, is a good enough team to have done what they did against Washington. What are your thoughts there?
I think Washington played sloppy both games. I think they're better than that, but I think you're going to see inconsistent performance all year. I see a 7.5, fine, whatever. I'm not involved. I'm involved for the season already at higher win totals than 7.5. So I'm comfortable. I don't want any part of this team and the adjusted line.
No, I don't either.
Let's go to the divisions real quick to wrap it up, because there's some interesting stuff in the divisions. Miami, for example, I think we'll go fast on this because I know we're hitting an hour. Miami is plus 420, I believe, on the screen that you're showing for the AFC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that? I mean, to me, there are no thoughts. Buffalo's a clear cut, but maybe a Miami to make the playoffs might be interesting because they're playing that well.
Let's see what that make the playoffs is.
I opened up a can of worms there, but yeah, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, of course.
Minus 188. They were like plus 160 coming into the season.
No value. If it's minus 188, let's move on.
Yeah.
Baltimore's even money. Obviously, you and I got them at much bigger price. They would be even better if they would have been 2-0 before this. I don't see any changes or any value in that division. Do you see anything in that division?
In the Miami division,
Go ahead.
The Dolphins at 420 isn't. I don't think that's a garbage value there. I'm not going to place that, but you're not getting ripped off at that price. Wouldn't you agree? I certainly wouldn't lay 360 with Buffalo.
No, I wouldn't do anything in that division, but I understand that there'd be some love for Miami.
I'm comfortable with the Ravens bet still. The meltdown doesn't scare me.
No. Now let's go to Jacksonville in the AFC South, because you're looking at plus 360. I know you could have got
310.
more. 310. Okay, well that's interesting because when I sent this to you, it was 360. So they're getting bet this morning. They were 4 something yesterday. 450.
The only wager that I would place on there is Jacksonville. And even at plus 310, that's not bad, frankly.
So they've been hit hard.
Tennessee plus 200 is by far the worst value, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, Jacksonville then got hit hard in the last 2 days.
Yeah.
So shop around to see if there's a better price. Let's go to the AFC West. Your thoughts on any value in that? Because I see something that has value.
The only bet that I would consider making there are the Chargers plus the 240.
Yeah, I would consider the Chargers because they lost a road game to KC. Now, I know the Chargers don't have true home field advantage. That's a problem. But at least they're not going to be in Kansas City in the winter anymore. And yes, they did miss that game. But plus 250 implies that to break even, if you played this division out 7 times, you'd have to be right twice and wrong 5 times to break even. So do you think if they played this out 7 times, the Chargers would win more than 2 out of 7? I personally think it would be 3 out of 7. That's the ROI discussion everybody has to have. If you're going to get plus 250 and you're going to be right 3 times and wrong 4 times, that's a nice return on investment.
I think the NFC East divisional odds are insane. It's insanity. I don't have my full metrics in yet, but this is nuts. You can't lay minus 200 with the Eagles at this point from what we've seen. What do you think?
What's the Washington line?
Plus 1,000.
Okay, plus 1,100 in other places. I actually think they have a better than 1 in 10 chance of winning the division. Why not? They've got 1 win.
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think you kind of roll with it. Washington this week plays Philly. They're expected to lose. If they do lose, I don't think the odds change much. If they win, then you're going to see plus 600 all of a sudden. So
I would cut the line to take the Cowboys or the Giants or Washington. at these numbers before I would consider the Eagles.
Yeah.
What do we got here?
Now, for me, the Green Bay Minnesota dynamic is a hard pass.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It is. And the Lions at 750 is a little bit lower than it was coming into the season. So not seeing anything that floats my boat in that division.
Yeah, I'd recommend a hard pass.
And while I wouldn't lay the 460 on the Bucs, I don't want to take the any more Saints to win the division.
That was a bad loss, a bad divisional loss at home. Yeah. I think that closes the division and we move on.
The NFC West, clearly the value is in the 49ers plus 165.
Yeah, I mean, that's already been done by me this morning.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation. The learning curve is over. The 49ers host the Rams, I think, on Sunday night or Monday night, week 4. That's a bell cow game, and it's a standalone playoff revenge game. And instead of Lance doing the playoff revenge, now you got the quarterback who actually lost the game having playoff revenge. It's actually a little bit stronger in my mind. It's early enough in the season. Again, it has to be a standalone game. Otherwise, I don't care about the playoff revenge.
Yeah, it dilutes the exterior factors. You know what? If they reversed the Rams and the 49er odds, I probably would consider taking that also.
Yeah, personally, we talked about the Niners in season win 9.5. My gut reaction right now is that this is a better deal to take them to win the division as opposed to taking them the other way, unless you think Arizona has a chance to make it a 3-way circus, and I'm not sure about that.
No, I agree. You have to kind of narrow your focus down.
Yeah.
I'm just shopping lines here.
I think if I were setting this, I would have set them both at something like plus 115.
Yeah, I'm going to take this crappy line here. No, I agree with you. I don't know how you can have the Rams higher at this point.
Yeah.
And you can even get better. I'm seeing the Cowboys and the Giants at plus 550.
Yeah, shop. So I've been waiting for this show for a while. And I only gave you this information like 20 minutes before the show, but I think this is very educational, not only for us, but hopefully for the people who watch this. And both Chris and we actually look at the YouTube comments. So if you have questions about any team or thoughts about anything we say or disagreements with what I said or what Chris said, write them down in the YouTube comments so that we could comment on them and talk about them, because we'd love to have more of this going on.
Yeah, and I'd like to apologize because I'm actually behind on the YouTube comments. I was religiously keeping up with them for a while and just buried. And we appreciate those comments and always get to them at some point. So we've gone team by team, 2-week evaluation. Did you want to address anything from last week or anything looking ahead?
The only thing, looking ahead, don't forget to watch us on Friday because we're going to talk about 2 games. I don't remember which 2 games, but we'll tweet it out which 2 games. And I have a thought about what we're going to do with that show as well. So we'll talk about 2 games this week. No reason to look behind. We talked about some of the lucky wins, some of the exciting finishes. It's really just looking ahead. Again, we're talking. You're going to change your metrics over very soon. I still have 2 more weeks before I change my metrics over. But in the meantime, the conditioning, everything we talked about in August is starting to go in the waste paper basket now, because now it's what have you done in 2022? I'm looking at San Francisco when they get at full strength. I'm looking at a couple of other teams, Indianapolis, other teams. There's been some key players missing early in the season. So I'm going to factor that in. Any cluster decisions. I'm just going to keep looking at sack ratios. That's very important to me. I'm going to look at quarterback turnovers, turnover ratios. Other than that, nothing else to add, Chris.
Yeah, I've been cheating, and I've been generating the spreadsheets for week 1 and week 2, which I normally didn't used to do, but I started doing last year a trailing 5 weeks. So I did want to start with week 1 this year, and obviously they haven't had enough time to shape at this point. Some of the results are very extreme, and it's just a reminder that you can't overreact to 1 or 2 weeks. You need more information before you can judge. Because if I showed I've got the Rams in the bottom 5 right now, if I'm not mistaken. They have done so poorly. It's shocking. I'm going to look that up right now. And then you've got teams like Detroit that, as I mentioned earlier, Tennessee and the Chargers never made the top 10. The Lions are closer to the top 10 right now than the Chargers are on my chart. So the Lions could beat both of those teams to the first team to make the top 10. And I think we can all agree that sounds a little absurd.
I'll look at the way the numbers are trending. But I'm not willing to look at my numbers and just solely base anything on my statistics until 4 games have been played. Too many interconnections. The dots haven't been interconnected between teams, and you could be playing some really bad or some really good teams early, and it skews everything.
Yeah, it was really bizarre to look at the week 1 data.
Never look at week 1 in a vacuum. No. Never.
But after 2 weeks, it molds just a little bit. But clearly, some teams in my position when using metrics, I'm actually kind of worried. Hey, I'm seeing some outliers that are, kind of concerning that I want to see corrected statistically. Before I start using my spreadsheet data as my primary starting point.
Well, that's all I have. You got anything else?
I'm just looking at my spreadsheets here. I have the Rams and Pittsburgh as the 5th and 6th worst teams at this point. And I don't think either one of them belong down there. So we're going to see a switch there. And another absurd anomaly is that I've got Jacksonville in the top 10. And that doesn't make any sense. Cleveland in the top 10. That doesn't make any sense. And how the hell is Denver, knocking on the top 10 after what they've done? Is there anything that stands out to you that Denver is actually doing well?
Let me take a look at where they are, and I'll tell you, based on my team sheets, here they are.
That makes no sense that they could be, doing that well overall.
One meaningless stat, and that's the fact that their yards per carry running the ball. They have that dual running back attack, so that's not bad. But I don't have metrics that say they're anything more than an 8-8 team.
The Raiders are very low. Dallas and Cincinnati and Carolina and Indianapolis are down there. New England's actually still in the middle of the pack. Atlanta's actually in better shape.
Maybe we revisit this after 4 weeks, because then you got data points that interconnect a little more.
Yeah, it's the point of discussing it is basically it's fool's gold to take 2 games of data seriously at this point. There's a lot of teams that we still don't know what they're about, and we touched on a handful of those and acknowledged that. There's very few teams that I can sit there and stand behind at this point and say I know what they're about. What about you?
No, I'm still looking at what I said preseason, what they were last season, unless they're new coaches, and then I'm gathering a lot of 2022 data. But I'm not locked into anything right now, and I don't want to be locked into anything for any team. Open-minded on all 32.
When did the bye week start?
Bye weeks this year, I think you play 5 games. Maybe there's 2 teams with a bye week 5, and then it starts in earnest. So we'll get a full first four games, the first quartile of the season. Very important week 5 for me. That's when I get excited. I get excited week 1 and week 5. In the meantime, I'm gathering data and we're forming opinions. And now we're doing this new thing where we try to find some value in the season wins and divisional stuff.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that we're going to plan on doing weekly, not necessarily on video, but this video is an example of, I would say 95% of the content in this video was not for the video purposes. This is the way Ron and I go about evaluating, these types of situations. So, it's the real deal, not much different than what we normally do.
And, like I said at the top, Chris didn't know what he was getting into in this show, and he's seeing the numbers real time. So no rehearsal, no idea what either one of us thoughts were. And then we brainstorm them and somebody makes a good point and we roll with it. We disagree, whatever comes to our mind.
Yeah, and it's important when you're evaluating. See, I don't mind going in cold, and I don't think Ron minds going in cold because we're not afraid to sit there and say, I don't know. Hey, explain this to me.
Yeah.
If you caught me off guard, there's no ego in sports betting. There is always more that we don't know than we do know. So the way that we are able to expand our knowledge, Ron will talk to people. I'll talk to people. We've got certain sourcing, and we bounce each other's ideas off of each other. And more times than not, the other person is bringing up stuff that that hasn't been thought of by the other person.
Yeah, and we're going in cold from a conversational standpoint, but like Chris, like you said the last few minutes, you have data on these teams and I have my sheets on these teams. So we're formulating information, data points that are important to us as we go along. We may not be married to them right now. We certainly shouldn't be. But we know what we've seen the first 2 weeks and we'll expand on that. But the points that are being made about people being out of the lineup or in the lineup or other situational factors, schedule placement, and so on are still kind of off the cuff. And that's what we're dealing with. We're just brainstorming what we have and how we can use the data that we have.
Yeah, and by Tuesday, once the season kicks in, I'll have more formulated opinions. But as far as these first 3 to 4 weeks, I'm completely open-minded to what wagers I'm going to have on the table this week by Sunday, because there's just so much unknown, and there's so much that you have to absorb from different sources, and monitoring the injuries and the coaching, speak. Just fascinating how a guy like Campbell would sit there and admit he's drunk during Monday Night Football while he's scouting. So is that going to come into play? But
yeah,
my point is, I don't know what I'm betting this weekend.
Yeah. So we're running a little long. Let me leave everybody with one thought. When you watch the game on Thursday, Pittsburgh at Cleveland, shake your head when you look at the logo in the middle of the field, whatever that thing is. Isn't that the team that has that new logo in the middle of the field? That's some animal or some...
I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I thought it would just be a Browns logo.
I'm pretty sure it's that game. If not, just scratch this. But I believe there's some sort of weirdo logo on the middle of the field in the Browns game. So shake your head and have a laugh with that.
Last comment I'm going to make. I got a feeling that we bypassed overreaction week 2. And when I look at this board, I'm starting to wonder whether this became overreaction week 3. Have you noticed any of that?
Now, I think some of the lines are a little tricky, but you get that on marquee games. You see a Monday night game, and then you see Philly climb to 7 or something like that. I think that's traditionally has gone on for years. When all eyes are on a game and somebody looks really, really good, then the other team gets valued or devalued. So I just think that happens naturally. And we deal with it, whether or not we think it's a right opinion or a wrong opinion. We look at the line and we say, is that warranted or is it not warranted?
Well, this Tennessee being a 2-point underdog at home against Las Vegas is interesting.
Yeah, again, it's a team that played on Monday night.
Well, I might fall for the banana in the tailpipe on a few of these, but as Ron said, we went long, and hope that people found we're really appreciative of all the positive comments that we have received. We're just doing our thing, so we're not creating anything for anybody else. This is what we do. And sometimes it may be beneficial, sometimes not. But this is the way it is. This is the way we think all week long. Please like and subscribe, make comments, whatever you want. Friday, we'll be back with 2 games to discuss specifically with Ted from Sports USA. Looking forward to that. Until next time, appreciate everybody joining us and all the great comments that we received.
So long.